Away to the world across the seas, where pilots all have law degrees.
Welcome once again to another episode of The Canon Law. I'm Travis Anderson. Today I thought I would discuss a more difficult topic for many lawyers in this field, and that is the subject of ethics.
I choose ethics.
In most jurisdictions, ethics are controlled by what's called the rules of disciplinary conduct. In Texas, we have the Texas rules of disciplinary conduct, and that is how an attorney knows how to behave in a given situation. Now, the majority of the rules are pretty specific in the sense that they give you a pretty clear understanding of what you are supposed to be doing, specifically with client relationships. It governs a whole host of pretty difficult situations that lawyers might find themselves in. But I thought we'd have a little bit more fun with this topic, and I would review a series of videos that I have noticed watching cartoons and television. I tend to like animated shows, especially those that are more geared towards an adult audience in the sense that they are pretty funny and they have more adult humor. One of my favorite is from an episode of the cartoon known as Rick and Morty. I always found that this is a pretty interesting little cartoon.
We'll see you every other weekend, though, right?
Absolutely, Morty. And your mom's lawyer says if I can get enough in the settlement, he can help me sue for full custody.
That's an interesting concept. I don't really understand that.
I'm confused.
So here, Jerry, the character, is identifying that he is being represented by his own attorney, or maybe he's self-represented. We call that pro se, where he and his wife are divorcing, and his wife has an attorney. That attorney represents her. I'm not exactly certain in the context of the show what exactly he's referring to when he gets a settlement.
$1 million. I'm rich!
However, sometimes as a consequence of a divorce decree, which is what they're called in Texas, we enter what's called a final decree of divorce. And that stipulates to all of the things that either the court found. So when you have a divorce, you can present things to the court, and the court can dispose of those by making decisions about them, or the parties can come to an agreement.
I'll make that deal. Did you make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
Courts aren't really fond of listening to people fight over who gets the toaster. But there are certain assets, of course, that have value: homes, cars, things like that, retirement accounts, bank accounts, the money in savings, for example. Those are things that people will often disagree. And then, of course, the most valuable asset that a couple may have is their children.
Look. They're dreaming.
But in this case, Jerry is saying that if I get a settlement, perhaps he is expecting a larger percentage of the marital estate.
Swimming in it.
And then, of course, use those funds to hire his wife's attorney in order to get custody. Well, that's an ethical problem, because after a person has represented a party, you can't then represent the opposite side of a case. So if you represent the plaintiff, you can't thereafter return and represent the defendant in another cause of action. That wouldn't make much sense, especially if the parties are still in conflict with one another.
Oh, God, buddy, I'm sorry. You okay?
And the reason that is pretty obvious, in the sense that if I represent somebody in any kind of a context, a family law case, personal injury case, for example, or even in a workers' compensation setting, which is an administrative case, I learn certain things about that person that I could then use, if I were suing them, I could use against them.
You dare use my own spells against me, Potter?
And of course, because of privilege, I'm now in a conflict because I would need to use those things against that person to represent the interest of my current client. But that would mean that I would be violating the relationship that I had with my past client, which means I would have to destroy privilege.
It's a two-player swing.
Now, there are exceptions to that in the sense that with full disclosure and consent, usually written consent of any party or an attorney can represent them. The difficulty there is the chances that you would get that consent are very low, and usually to avoid any problem that may arise, attorneys will simply decline to do that. So this is why we do conflicts checks. So I keep lists of my clients. I have a client come to me and they were hit by somebody in a car that I previously represented. Of course, we'd want to do a conflicts check under that circumstances to make sure that we're not suing somebody we previously represented. Well, here's another situation, and this clip comes from the show Boston Legal, which was a funny show that happened in the early 2000s. The famous attorney Alan Shore and Denny Crane. Let's watch this clip.
Hey! Now, if you don't want to give me no change, that's fine. How about the courtesy of a response?
You don't want a response?
Denny, what the hell are you...
Relax. Paintball. Benny Crane.
You shot me.
I did.
You the big lawyer?
I am. What's going on?
I can take you to court for assault, man.
Sue me.
But I'm willing to settle. Now, give me $100,000.
Seems a little high. How about Zip? Does Zip work for you?
I may be homeless, but I ain't stupid.
My mistake.
I'll be back. My lawyer dropped me.
Bugger.
If you think you won,
I do.
I'll find another one.
No, you won't. Nobody's gonna make any money suing Denny Crane, the client who initiated the conflict by throwing a rock. But hey, if you can find another shark like the last one, you know where to find me. Only, don't come in personally, okay, sport? I'll file a complaint for stalking.
I'll represent you.
This a joke?
Of course it is.
No, it isn't. I'll be your lawyer.
I'm confused.
Now, I share Denny's sentiment.
I'm confused.
Now, in this show, if you're not familiar with it, Alan Shore and Denny Crane are both friends and associates at the same law firm. So the problem with this particular case is that obviously two lawyers working at the same law firm couldn't represent clients that are opposed to each other in the same litigation. That would be an absolute conflict of interest. So, and the reason is, again, quite obvious. Certainly, Alan Shore and Denny Crane in this particular episode would be able to actually access the files and the information of each other's clients. Now, in this case specifically, Denny Crane is the client, and I assume would represent himself.
Denny Crane.
Because he's this powerful lawyer in the show. And Alan Shore, of course, would then represent the homeless gentleman that's in the case. Now, the case that sprung, and I had to clip a little bit out, but he was hit in the face with a paintball from Denny Crane after he'd thrown a rock at Denny, as you saw in the clip. Now, in this case, Alan Shore, the result of it is Alan Shore actually ends up paying the gentleman a settlement out of his own pocket in order to both eliminate the situation, compensate the homeless person, but also to keep his friendship with Denny. But the case wouldn't have been able to go forward under those circumstances. There's no way that Alan Shore, without the absolute consent of both the homeless gentleman that was going to be his client and Denny Crane, would have been able to represent the homeless gentleman. All that would have happened is Denny Crane would have actually, he could have filed a grievance and get him removed from the case. So that would be an easy way to resolve that conflict or that case. The possibility of collusion between the attorneys would be pretty bad in that situation. So let's go on to the next case, next clip that I saw.
We should hire you. Jesus, I'd give you the 25 grand as a signing bonus. I'll take it. Unfortunately, we only hire from Harvard. And you not only did not go to Harvard Law School, you haven't even gone to any law school.
What if I told you that I consume knowledge like no one you've ever met and I've actually passed the bar?
I'd say you're full of crap.
If you're not familiar with the show Suits, in this case, we have Harvey and Mike in this interview. Harvey is the attorney, and Mike is interviewing as a result of some degree of malfeasance. Mike finds his way in the interview room with Harvey. Harvey's a high-powered lawyer. And Mike is a brilliant person. Now, of course, that doesn't make you an attorney. Simply because you're highly intelligent doesn't mean that you're a lawyer. You have to be licensed. And the reason is because people who are held to be attorneys have to be held to a very high ethical standard. And we don't want people who have a criminal record, especially one that's associated with something we call a crime of moral turpitude, where deceit, lying to somebody, is an element of the crime. It's called a crime of moral turpitude. So in this case, Mike would be ineligible in a lot of ways from even practicing law, were he even to go to law school and graduate. But he didn't. And so Harvey actually considers and hires Mike, which is a complete ethical breach. Now, I don't really understand this show. I haven't watched too many episodes of it. I don't really like the show very much because it kind of hurts my brain.
Ugh, brain hurty.
To know that Mike is continuing to practice law, even though he's not an attorney, and this entire massive firm is actually covering for him. I don't think that anybody's intellect, no matter how significant, is worth sacrificing the legitimacy of an enterprise that you've spent your life building. Imagine what would happen if they found out that the person who prevailed in a case was not actually a licensed attorney and was misrepresenting themselves before the bar. We're talking about some very, very serious issues, legal implications, and criminal possibilities. So I don't watch too many legal shows, but I do find it funny when lawyers are represented in media as they are in these cases. And of course, everyone's favorite TV lawyer is the great Lionel Hutz.
If there's one thing America needs, it's more lawyers. Can you imagine a world without lawyers? Oh.
Now, I don't necessarily share that sentiment, but I do understand why some people feel that way. And I wanted to comment on that, just a brief amount. Lawyers get a bad rap sometimes because people think that we remove from them certain freedoms, abilities that they had previously. So, for example, I had a friend in law school that said, I don't like lawyers because they rubber coat everything. We put padding on everything. In fact, the other day I was at a pizza place and there was a transition between the main floor where they took us back to the room where we ate, and then there was an area where we're seated, where the benches and stuff were. And there was about a 2-inch little gap in the concrete there. And it was a raised portion where it was raised about 2 inches. But it wasn't visible. I mean, because of the concrete texture and the way the concrete was, it wasn't visible. Now, I'd noticed that they had previously had some kind of tape as a warning or some kind of something to identify it, but it had worn away. Those situations may seem like, oh, a lawyer's going to sue somebody if they trip over that. And that's true. If somebody who's perhaps elderly, maybe has bad eyesight, tries to walk between one area of the floor to the other, and they trip over that transition and they fall. I mean, I've seen pretty severe injuries from what look like simple falls where people end up with broken hips, dislocated knees, even knee replacements or hip replacements as a result of those kinds of falls. Obviously, if the restaurant's aware of this defect or problem in the premises, they should take care of it. They should warn people. They should do something to fix it.
Who's to blame? That's what you don't want.
So that it doesn't cause injury to others. And so lawyers do help people who have been seriously injured to find the means by which they can recover and be compensated. And so lawyers do accomplish a great deal of services in the communities. We also, and I myself, I volunteer as a mediator, which means I resolve conflicts between disputing parties. And I do a lot of that for free, or pro bono as it's called. And so it's important as part of our ethical obligations to give back to the community, to service the communities in which we live.
Well, aren't you a treat?
And not just as the joke runs, not just act like pirates. And so thanks for watching this episode. I look forward to seeing you in other episodes of The Canon Law. Thank you.
Away to the world across the seas, where pirates all have law degrees.